I'm going to be the person that's going to call the meeting to order. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Patty will take a roll call. And then we need to select a chair, and then you're a committee on your own. Okay? So if everybody will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Patty, you can call the roll, please.
Charlotte DeMolay. Tony Gatliff.
Here.
Dave Gaddis.
Here.
Kathleen Clazier. Leslie Notero.
Here.
Robert Risberg.
Here.
Michael Zabel.
Here. Okay. So is there anyone that wants to make a nomination for the chair of the committee?
City Manager Reeves, so far I've only gotten one response that showed interest, and that was Leslie Notero, so I don't know if anyone else has any interest.
Does anyone else have any interest? Okay, so, Patty, you want to, I guess we can all just do it as a motion to
Motion and a second for,
appoint, a motion and a second from the committee? Okay, to appoint Leslie Notaro as chairman. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, Leslie, it's yours now. You can finish it.
Okay, thank you. Second item is selection of a secretary. Okay, do we have any volunteers?
I did not.
Okay, anyone like to volunteer as secretary?
Mr. Zabel, you did a great job last time. Any interest?
No, I'm back in training.
So if you're nominated, that's a no.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mr. John said, if I'm nominated, I will not serve.
Anyone that's not here that we can nominate? Looking for a volunteer. Okay, well, does this mean Patty gets to do the minutes?
Well, you need to select a secretary
Okay.
for someone.
I'm just going to go ahead and speak up. I struggled, and
Yeah.
I really struggled to keep up, so I wouldn't be the right person.
And just to clarify, Patty will give you an outline. So really, it's just filling in blanks. It's not, you're going to have to write 35 pages of minutes. It's not like a city council.
No.
It's completely different. So if someone would be willing to do that, that's,
No? I guess it's up to me. All right, I'll nominate myself.
I'll nominate her. Oh, can I do that as chairman?
someone else.
Second?
Second. Okay. So Dave's the secretary, and we'll have you get that platform. Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you. The third item is the presentation by City Attorney Fred Riley on government in the sunshine and Robert's Rules of Order. Fred.
My name is Fred Riley. I'm the city attorney, and I've worked with a number of you before, and am currently working with a number of you right now. But Lynn and Patty asked me to come speak to you this evening, and when the Charter Review Committee was convened a couple months ago, I came and spoke to them. I provided them with the same basic handout that I'm providing to you. Hopefully you've had a chance to read that. Patty distributed it earlier. It's only the highlights, and I want to cover a few things and make you aware of a few resources, talk through a few points, and then address any questions that y'all may have. The handout that I provided to you is really pretty concise. There's a booklet that the Florida Attorney General's office puts out, which is the Sunshine Manual. The Sunshine Manual is updated every year, and the Sunshine Manual, it's broken basically into two parts. The first part is compliance with the Sunshine Law, and the second part is compliance with the public records requirements and providing public records. I'll briefly talk about both of those, but I want you to be aware the Sunshine Manual is available online. It's also available, I have copies of it. I'm sure Lynn and Patty have copies of it, but I believe it's pretty close to a 400-page book, and it's in small, fine print, and the Sunshine Manual addresses all the different legal issues related to public meetings and public records. So much of that is covered in statutory sections. It's a very well organized booklet, so and because it's available online, you can probably run down many of the questions that you may have and find an answer to them. The reason the booklet's so long is because it includes what I would say are the intricacies of the law and the cases that have been decided over the course of any given year that constitute the form of what is the current state of law in Florida. I don't want to get into the weeds in this explanation this evening. There's no need to do that. Tonight, the fundamentals are really what you need to know, and if you know the fundamentals, then hopefully you will not be in situations where you need to get into the intricate parts of the law. I will tell you, both the Sunshine Law and the Public Records Law are they're statutory in their basis, and then they're affected by case law. And the statutes have been, I would say, riddled with exceptions ever since the statutes were first passed. And every year, inevitably, there's a handful of changes to the law, and let me give you a couple examples. With public records, there have been changes related to try and keep up with the technology issues. And I went through this last city council meeting. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know which, the law is always lagging behind technology. And the law is in place in Florida with public records to make sure that there's transparency in government. That's the objective. The whole thing is built on that concept. And if there's a document that constitutes a public record, then a citizen should be able to access that public record and understand by viewing the public record what their government is doing. And that's the basic concept. Over the course of time, there are numerous exceptions that are built into the law, and the legislature passes these exceptions. I'll give you just a very basic thing. If one of the exceptions is related to your social security numbers, and if your social security number's on a document, by law that has to be redacted, because having that floating out in the public sphere leads to identity theft and untold problems for you. In the government context, there's all sorts of different exceptions, and I would say there's probably scores of them, if not a couple hundred would be my guess, if you really were counting them up. But with the public records aspect of it, the basic concept under Florida law is that if you have a document and it constitutes a public record, then you are obligated to provide it to somebody. So here I have a document, it relates to public record. If somebody's walking by my desk and sees it, they should be able to ask right there on the spot for a copy of it, and I should dutifully provide it to them, okay? The public records law does not require me to create a document that fits your request. It requires me to provide you with a copy of a document that is a public record. A note, I like picking stupid examples because people remember them. If I send a birthday card to Lynn, that's not a public record because it's a birthday card to Lynn. It's not a document that relates to public business. If I send a birthday card to Patty and in it I say, best wishes on your birthday, and P.S. tomorrow I'm going to send you a marked up version of an ordinance, and you and I need to discuss this, and here's one of the changes I'm addressing in this. Me adding that P.S. to the birthday card would make it a public record because it relates to me conducting public business with Patty. Okay? So stupid example, but you see the distinction. The public records law in Florida, in my opinion, at times can be extremely onerous because, dirty secret is if you wanted to cause untold trouble to somebody, you could ask for public records, and you could just create a lot of difficulty for the city clerk and others if you chose to do that. Again, the underlying concept is transparency in government, and if the government has what constitutes a public record, the citizens should be able to obtain it. For purposes of you serving on a board, there's going to be a certain amount of public records between the city staff people and yourselves. And I'll get into the sunshine law issue in just a minute, but I would encourage you to think in terms of making it easy for you to retrieve public records in the future if you're ever asked for them. In all likelihood, in serving on this committee, there really shouldn't be a situation where y'all are creating hundreds of public records. But if you do, then the question is inevitably going, if somebody asks for them, it's going to be who is the custodian of the records, and how does the city and the city staff, as efficiently as possible, provide the public records to the person that's asking for it. So this is a big buildup by me to tell you, here's the key thing you can do, is on any, most people today communicate via email. On any email that you are communicating with concerning this committee, you should copy the city clerk on the email. And if you do that, then the city clerk has them on the city server, and it is easy for her, as the custodian of the city's records, to fulfill the public records request. If you don't copy her, then you are the custodian, and you have a legal obligation to provide the copies of the public records. And that could become a very onerous thing for you if you're the person that's the custodian. Failure to properly handle public records can lead to an ethical violation. a civil violation and potentially a criminal violation. So, my task this evening is not to put the fear of God in anybody. My task is to tell you that in advance that you should be oriented towards making sure that you comply with the law. And of course, if there's questions, Patty's done this for, she's been a city clerk for quite a while and dealt with this over a long period of time. She's very knowledgeable. I'm knowledgeable, and if you have questions, then we're the resources that are available to help answer the questions on complying with public records. But the biggest thing is orient yourself towards how do I make sure that the city clerk is able to readily access any communications, because in all likelihood, that's where if somebody's seeking public records, if they're related to the work of the committee, Patty will not need you to do anything. She has this stuff and keeps records and can handle it. The one place that will likely involve you is communications between or by you as members of the committee that are in all likelihood email. I will go one step further and talk very briefly about text messages, because text messages are, if they relate to city business, they are subject to the public records law too. A lot of people now use text messages constantly. I do too. I use it now more than probably I ever did, but I don't use it to give legal advice, and I don't use my cell phone and text messages to do anything other than, am I meeting you today at lunch at noon? Are you coming over this weekend? And none of that relates to city business. When you start to communicate between yourself as a committee member and Lynn as the city manager, Patty as the city clerk, those will be public records, and you're obligated to keep them. And that, of course, immediately, in my mind, sets up a practical challenge as to how do you turn over, if somebody asks for them, your messages that are in text, and what happens if you destroy them and all those sorts of things. You open Pandora's box. So my legal advice to you is don't ever open Pandora's box up front. Simply don't communicate by text messages related to your work as a committee member. And if you're going to communicate, use email and copy the city clerk on the email. That'll make your life infinitely easier, I absolutely assure you. Any questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
Sort of along that same line, what about voicemails on your phone? If you leave a voicemail, is that the same thing? Do those have to be saved and turned over to
Potentially.
the public record?
Yeah, I mean, potentially it is,
Okay,
but
just curious.
if it's a voicemail, there's a statute that addresses things that are, can't remember what the term they use. They're not really business items. They are, hey, I called you at 10:05. Please call me back. Here's my number. That I don't think that would be a public record, but
If there was some meat to the message,
if there's meat to the message about city business, then it would be something that now you have to be concerned about whether you should be maintaining it as a public record. Again, my approach to this is very simple. Don't leave meaty messages. Leave, I called you, please call me back. And that way you just don't get into, I didn't intend to talk about Pandora's box, but it's a good example and it's something you'll remember. don't open Pandora's box. And I will tell you, a lot of the problems with all this stuff can be completely avoided if you, one, know you have an obligation to comply with the law, and I will tell you point blank, you do, as an advisory board, you're obligated, and you have to be disciplined about it, and you have to do the same thing over and over, and if you do that, everything will be fine. One admonition I make to people in municipal government is every single email that I write is written from the standpoint that tomorrow it will be front page news. And I will tell you, most of what I write shouldn't be front page news anywhere because it's not interesting. It's business oriented, but I'm, from telling you as a member of the committee, leave out personal issues, personal items, leave that out. Be very straightforward, be very disciplined, and expect that tomorrow morning it'll be on the front page of the newspaper. And if you do that, then later on, you don't have to go back and redact things for extraneous stuff that is an exemption under Florida law. And you also don't have to be embarrassed about something you said. I mean, telling somebody a joke or telling them about your wild weekend or something like that, that's not business oriented. Be disciplined, and if you're doing city business, do city business and leave the other stuff for the next email, which is completely not city business and it's not a public record. And I will tell you that the tendency is, people are social in nature and they want to, how was your weekend? What did you do? I went to, A, B, and C. And, let me now tell you about this business item. Separate the two. There's business and then there's non-business. With the emails that you send related to the committee, only focus on business. And believe me, you'll be far better off. This is, I mentioned earlier about the law doesn't keep up with the technology. The best place I can point to for that, other than a cell phone, is social media. And I will tell you, social media is extremely problematic when it comes to public records and the Sunshine Law. Okay, that's a teaser. I'm going to come back to social media in a minute. Let me say a few things about the Sunshine Law. As a appointed committee, this group of people, you are obligated under Florida law to comply with the Sunshine Law. What is that law? The law is pretty simple. You, as committee members, have to communicate in a public forum where there has been prior notice and people have an opportunity to know that you're going to be discussing something, and the discussion that this the committee members have has to be in a public forum that's available to anybody to come and listen to. Anything that is communicated between this group of people that's outside of a public meeting is, in all likelihood, going to be a violation of the Sunshine Law. Okay?
And that's coordinating. You can't coordinate any actions until the meeting itself. I read this and I thought it was, first of all, there must be a lot of bad things going on between public officials to have laws like this. But how do you coordinate meetings? Usually, you know who's going to bring up what topics or whatever, but the Sunshine Law seems like you talk about nothing until you hit the meeting.
Well,
And
there's...
I don't have a problem with anybody knowing anything I'm doing, but it just seems like it would really increase the length of the meetings for one thing, and slow down the coordination of the committee to get into answers. I don't know, I just, it
Well,
seem efficient.
I'll give you an answer. If it's something that y'all are going to be discussing and taking action on, then you should not discuss it outside of the meeting, you should discuss it in the meeting. And that's a rule of thumb. What, I will tell you, what happens a lot of times, and I deal with this, I won't say every single day, but I deal with it numerous times in any given week. Because I represent 2 cities, so let me make that clarification. I have 2 cities, and they have similar types of issues, but what happens frequently is people want to do things as a matter of degree. They want to split hairs. And I'm telling you up front, if it were me, I wouldn't be relying on splitting a hair. I would either be in the clear or not in the clear. One of my favorite legal analogies is don't be halfway over the fence and look down and realize it's a barbed wire fence, and there you are suspended above it, and you're at some point going to come, gravity's going to bring you down. Be on the right side of the fence, don't be on the wrong side of the fence.
So what I hear you telling me is that we can coordinate, but we can't make any decisions without a public forum. Or are you telling me?
That isn't what I said. I wouldn't suggest you coordinate.
So,
That's why you have the city clerk and the city manager would be, and you have a chairperson. The chairperson will coordinate with the city clerk for the meetings that you have, and at the meetings that you have, you need to discuss the business items that are on your agenda and anything else that is irrelevant to the work that you're doing with the city. Coordinating meeting may be fine, but my experience is coordinating meeting slides into something else which is substantive.
you know what, too, and I'm thinking big army and where I was and how we had to have so many moving parts, and you're right, you probably don't have to have so many moving parts, it's probably a lot simpler than I'm thinking.
Say that again?
It's probably a lot simpler than I'm making it, the issues that we're discussing. I think I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it is.
I'm only giving you some of my benefit of my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, okay, no, you know.
Can I comment on that? If you want to have something like on the agenda item to discuss, tell Patty, please ask her, please put this on the agenda, and then you can write a memo. You know, your thoughts or something, and give it to Patty, and it goes in the agenda
Okay,
packet.
all right, that's what it
That's, is that,
That's
does
it.
that work?
I'd like to add to that, I would consider Patty to be your filter.
Okay.
Right, so something that you feel like needs to be discussed, even if it's only with me, it needs to go to everyone, but it needs to go through Patty.
Okay,
All right.
I got it.
Sorry, Patty.
Well, you have a chairman, a chairwoman, you have the clerk will be present at the meetings, and to my knowledge, and, you know, the object of being on the committee is not to find a way to get you in trouble. The object is for you to do something to contribute to to the benefit of the city and the citizens. So that's really what you're trying to do. The thing that I'm relying on my experience, because of the potential ethical problems and the potential for legal problems, most people don't want to serve on a committee only to find out they're going to get an ethics charge against them. That's not why y'all are serving on the committee. You're serving on it for a very good reason. And the thing that I will tell you is, even though your motives are pure, that doesn't mean somebody won't file an ethics charge against you. And you need to at least know the basics so that you're not in a precarious position. And, you know, the one thing that will turn you off from being a volunteer on a committee or someday seeking public office is if you have to defend an ethics charge or be a defendant in a lawsuit. And that's, you know, again, I really don't want to put the fear of God in anybody, but that will turn you off, I assure you. So, politics is different now than it was even 10 years ago, and in some respects, being on a committee is being in a political atmosphere, and that's simply at times a difficult place to be. So the thing that I have always advised city commissions, city council, and boards is don't put yourself in a precarious position. Know the basics, and part of the basics is if you have a question or you recognize a situation is developing, then ask for some guidance or for some help. Inevitably, this won't be the first time this ever has happened. Most of things that happened, you could, you know, if I was tasked with finding it, you could find it in 5 minutes in the Sunshine Manual, because the same things happen over and over and over again. Okay? With the Sunshine Law, it's, again, most of the questions tend to be a question of degree, and, you know, I would choose between black and white and be on the right side of the line. There's, you know, the questions that inevitably come up are, what happens if I'm at a cocktail party and I'm standing next to Dave Gaddis and, you know, should I not even say anything to him? And the answer is no. What you can't say to him is, you can't raise an issue about, let's talk about an agenda item that's on this committee. You could be standing next to Joseph Manso, and you could talk to him about it, but he's not on this committee. This is the group of people that's on the committee, and y'all are prohibited by law from talking about the work of this committee in a setting that's outside of public notice and a public forum. Okay?
To each other.
To each other. So if you're at a meeting or a dinner party and Dave's standing next to you, you can talk about the coronavirus, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the weather. All that's fine. None of that relates to the business of the committee. So you're okay. But the problem comes up inevitably, perception. And if you and Dave are over in the corner having a animated discussion, other people will inevitably think you're talking about city business and, you know, cast aspersions against you. So, you know, the safe thing to do is don't be in the corner having an animated discussion. And it sounds stupid for me to say that, but, you know, I, again, am telling you what I've dealt with in the past. Have any of y'all taken the ethics course that the secretary? Okay, so 2 of you have. There's an ethics course that you can take online that I would really encourage you to take. And Patty, you can give them the information for that, can't you? I would encourage you to take that because will walk you through the Sunshine Law and the Public Records Law, and basically cover I won't say from A to Z, but it will cover most of the stuff that you would need to know. And especially if this is your first time serving on a committee, it would be extremely enlightening to you, because it simply makes you aware of a lot of the parameters that are in place and, you know, will help keep you safe in walking through the minefield. And, you know, again, I don't want to make it sound so dire, but in a way, that's what you're, with both areas of law, that's what it is. There's plenty of places where you can step on a landmine and have a negative consequence, and the object is to do the work of the committee and do good things for the city, and nobody steps on a landmine at any given point. So let me bounce back to the social media, because now that you know that public records and sunshine law, let me tell you some of the complications of social media. And I'll start by saying what I do, and you know, I'm not sitting here telling you I have a lock-on wisdom, I don't. But I'll tell you what I found to be the easiest thing for me, and it makes it trouble-free for me, is I simply, on social media, don't talk about anything that relates to my job. I use it for social things like the great picture of my dog, or you know, the great dinner I made for my family. That's it. Getting on social media, to me, for government officials, or in your case, committee members, and discussing the work that you're doing for the municipality is fraught with problems. And let me give you a few examples. I'm sorry, I know your name because I can see it. Charlotte, Tony, no Dave, met him before.
Kathleen?
Okay. And I know Leslie, and I know Mike. If Mike and Kathleen are on Facebook, and Kathleen puts up a post about, I'm so excited to be part of the communications committee, and we're going to really do great things in, you know, expanding the communication from City of Bel Air Beach, and Dave chimes in, I'm excited to be there too, and I can't wait to get into this agenda next week. Is that a sunshine law violation?
Certainly is close.
I'd say it is, because now you two are having an out of public forum discussion about the city business that you're supposed to be working on. And what happens if you, Mike, delete your comment after you thought better that this is something you shouldn't be discussing in public or discussing on Facebook?
You're definitely over the line at that point. It's
Well,
your record.
The question is, are you destroying a public record? And, you know, I would say you probably are. And, you know, from just a simple exchange between two people, you immediately have probably, assuming you deleted your post, you have two potential problems. And, you know, to me, I can go on endlessly with stupid examples, but that's how crazy it can get with the public records law and the sunshine law. So to me, the better part of valor is don't engage in talking about public business in social media. As enticing as it may be, I would encourage you to be extremely disciplined and vigilant and simply don't do it. So it may not be quite as fun, but you know, there's too much potential for problems if you do that. And there's a lot of, the law is going to catch up eventually to the technology, but the reason I'm using the example of, nothing against either one of you, but I not so long ago, read a newspaper article about city commissioners in South Florida that did exactly what I just described. And they got ethics charges against them, and there was a lot of trouble for them. And, they weren't trying to, intentionally break the law. They weren't trying to go down the wrong path. They were simply discussing something that they really shouldn't have discussed on social media. So that's my example, and I can go into great depth if you want about different parts of it, but I will tell you that the far easier thing is just be disciplined and be vigilant about social media, and don't do it as it relates to this committee. And I think if you heed that advice, you'll sail along without any problems. At this point, do you have any specific questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a problem not talking about this committee and how I'm serving and who's on the committee and all that, but I do have very strong opinions about what's going on in the city. Because I am not allowed to speak many times in an open forum in the city, I do use our local, I guess it's social media, because I don't do social media except for that. And I feel like that's my only place where I can speak and be heard. But I would never talk about this. Is that an issue?
Say it again.
I don't,
I heard the first part.
okay.
I've been to too many rock concerts is my problem. And you're not speaking into the mic.
That's it's the line, or it's green.
Kathleen, if I can,
Oh, sorry.
Kathleen,
Sorry.
if I can,
Yeah, no,
there's a Bel Air Beach forum on Facebook. And what Kathleen, I think, is asking is, can she talk about stormwater drainage that's outside the purview of what we'll be doing? Can she talk about everything else except for communication on that social website?
well, I'm gonna do 5G. I mean, I have things that I really believe are hurting us, all of us. That's one of the things I'll pursue. This city has nothing to do with that.
But if they're outside of the communication board,
Yeah,
she should,
Well, what's within the scope of the communication board?
well, I guess it's to be determined.
you're gonna tell us that. I'll see you. We'll talk about the charter.
I'd say the communication board's a pretty wide scope.
Yeah.
So let me make another comment, just so I'm being thorough. Each one of you have the right to, your First Amendment right to express your opinion. Believe me, I will be at the head of the charge on that one, okay? But having said that, Florida law says that you have certain parameters, and if you are discussing stuff with other people that are on your committee, then there is the potential that there will be a violation of the law.
All right, I understand that.
Can I, let me add something to that. You say you're very strong on 5G. Well, if you're posting something about 5G, and whenever we're having these meetings, you think it's so important that it's something that should be added, maybe a little section devoted to 5G,
Then I can never talk about it.
you can never talk about it. So you box yourself into a corner whenever you do that. So my advice to you, and I don't know if you see me on Facebook, I don't know what you see or what you don't, but basically anything about city business, I don't bring it up whatsoever, because I'm afraid that in the future we may want to discuss it, and now I've put myself in harm's way.
I see.
So this is a very short committee.
Yeah,
It won't last long.
it's very.
My advice to you would be to take a break from it until this committee's done. And that would be the safest move I could possibly think of. You can post on whatever forum, but anything that you're afraid or anything that has to do with possible future city business, such as you may have to bring something up that goes from this committee to the regular council, then I would hold my breath. That's probably the best advice I could give you.
Well, I would agree with that advice. And I, again, will pose the question, what is the scope of this committee? The scope of this committee is to make recommendations on how to better the communication within the city, and you have a finite period of time when you're going to meet to make some recommendations. The recommendations ultimately you will vote on, because there will come a point, we just went through this with the Charter Review Committee. The committee did, and they did, I have to say, Mike was on that, and Vice Mayor Gunn, you were on it, and they did a really good job. They were exceptionally thorough, and they, at the end of the time period, they made a written recommendation to the city council of a number of different prioritized changes to the charter. And the hard work was done in the committee meetings where they sat and really got into the discussing and debating the different things that the members of that committee thought should be considered as amendments. And, you know, like Dave is saying, the good thing is it's for a finite period of time. So, you know, to me, the safest thing is take a break and concentrate on doing the work of the committee, and then when it's over, you can revert to leading the charge on, you know, things in the city of
Everyone
Bellevue.
can food.
I
Okay.
didn't say it'd be easy. It's never easy. Any other questions? Okay, well, I will make an offer, but I'm going to temper the offer, okay? Well, the tempered offer is, my job's to help the city avoid legal issues. That's really my role. And this stuff is fraught with the potential for legal issues. So my tempered offer is I'm available as a resource to help you, except with one caveat. It's not an open-ended check to call me at every turn to ask me for, you know, we need a legal opinion on stuff. With the Charter Review Committee, and that's all highly legal, because ultimately you're making recommendations on how to change the language of the charter. Theirs was more, they needed more help from me at the very end, just to make sure they were complying with the city charter and complying with Florida law, and they did. Y'all won't need my help in, I would say, much of anything, but you may get into a situation where you do need some legal help. If you do, I would suggest that the chairman contact Lynn, and Lynn then would discuss it with me. I really don't want to have people from the committee calling me directly, because it's not efficient that way, to be honest with you. So that's my tempered offer. But I'm available to help if needed.
Thank you very much. It also said on the agenda you were talking about Robert's Rules of Order. Do we all know those?
Okay. Robert's Rules of Order, your charge is to use that, I don't know if any of you have ever read it. You have? You're amazing. I don't know how you did it. Well, it's, the Cliff Notes version is probably what I would encourage you to utilize. It can be extremely complicated, and it can, it at times can make things make it a lot harder to conduct a meeting if you are being extremely rigid about Robert's Rules of Order. The thing that I would suggest to you is you have a chairperson, and you treat each other with respect and dignity, and you let each other, whoever has the floor is recognized, and they, when the person's completed with their comments, you move on to the next person that asks to be recognized, and the making the motions part is, to me, is very straightforward, and you simply run through the meetings and do things with respect to the other people on the committee. And if you do that, you won't have a whole bunch of problems. This is, I mean, most committees are run informally, and they are not run in a formal, rigid way, because, most of the people are, they're there to have a civil discussion and debate about certain things, and that's what they do. Having gone to a couple of the meetings of the Charter Review Committee, their chairman gave everybody an opportunity to speak. Everybody got to say their piece. They got to debate things, and they were all respectful of the other person's point of view. And at the end of the day, they had a vote, and they voted on what version of something to adopt. And when the vote was over, they simply moved on to the next thing. And they were efficient about it, and I thought very thorough, and they did a really good job in running that committee. So I would, since you have a couple of people that were on that committee, I would somewhat rely on their leadership, and Leslie's got a long history, and I think is pretty familiar with running meetings, so I think you'll be fine. I can answer any questions you have, but there's, going into depth on any of it is, to me, not really productive.
Any questions? Thank you, Fred. Appreciate that. Very good. The next item on the agenda is review of the Communication Advisory Committee's charter. And there were 2 pages in your packet, which talks a little bit about how the city council convened this committee to improve the communications between the city and its residents both ways, and to figure out how to do it, how to get feedback from the residents, and so on. The deliverables on here, at the end it says we're going to provide the city council with what needs to be communicated, how it needs to be communicated, when it needs to be communicated, recommendations on how to do it, how to determine if it's working, etc. So that really is what we have been charged with, and we've got 90 days, maybe up to 120 days to go through this, and as we go through it, we can, we'll all be looking at all of these things and figure out what we want to recommend to the city council. But that is our charter. Any questions on that? Comments? Okay. Glenn, strategic plan.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just stand. If you can't hear me, let me know. On behalf of the mayor and the city council, I'd just like to welcome everybody and thank you for stepping up and engaging in the city. This is an important undertaking, and we appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule. We understand everybody's got a lot going on. Obviously, things are going on that a lot of things we're dealing with that are all new to us, but we certainly appreciate you helping out the city. I'm not dispensing legal advice. The city manager and the city clerk are not official members of this committee, they're advisors. So you have unfettered access to these two people if you have questions or concerns about public records and/or communications under the Sunshine Law. It is kind of interesting as an observation to sit back right now and see revelations all of a sudden, like, oh, I didn't know that. And how do you get anything done?
I know, well, now it kind of explains why the news is.
So I think it's going to be kind of an enlightening experience for everybody, and some of us are old hands at it and understand some of the nuances and the glitches involved, and for others it's something new, and by all means take it back to the community and the people you have contact with, and maybe you can explain why things sometimes move at glacial speed or the word's not getting out, because there are certain considerations that have to be taken by public officials. Let's see. Strategic plan. Some people have a lot more familiarity with it than some of the others. Leslie was there at its inception. Dave Gaddis is intimately familiar with it. City manager, Marv Beam, council members. So the purpose of it is kind of a framework for giving us all a baseline for how we're going to make decisions, how we're going to categorize information, how we're going to prioritize stuff. It's done at the council level when it comes to making business decisions and kind of analyzing situations. And the reality of the situation is it's a trickle-down effect, and hopefully this provides the same framework and the same baseline for looking at the information that you're going to be gathering. If you understand the strategic focuses and the priorities of the city, then it'll help you formulate recommendations to the city with your communications recommendations. It's a living, changing document. Some of the information in here is already starting to be reshuffled and moved around as things come more and more into focus. Some of the issues are changing to this from what Leslie was there when she initially took part in the formulation of this thing. The second page is kind of a hierarchy of that thing, but at the end of the day, what we're looking at is a shared vision. We want everybody to be on the same page and thinking about the same priorities and the same focuses when we start making decisions. We'd like to institutionalize the process. That's the purpose of a written strategic plan, and it provides continuity over the long term. As council members change out, as city staff changes out, it provides and archives how we made decisions, why we made some of the decisions that are there. A second page starts at the top. What's the vision for the city? The whole idea, and everything we do, was to build a premier Gulf Coast residential community that everybody is proud of and takes pride of ownership in. The nutshell way that we are going to accomplish this is to create a high level of resident satisfaction. So we focus in on what are those things that our residents are looking for to take pride in their community and say, this is the place where I want to live. Because if we create a place where people want to live, that drives property values and creates this community thing for us. Underneath the mission, what you see are the 5 pillars or the 5 areas of strategic focus that we have keyed in on. And starting from the left side, you'll see safety and health. You'll see tax dollar value. That's getting maximum payback on your tax dollars. You see communications and community. This is one of those things that has changed. When the strategic plan first came out, The number 3 item was aesthetics and community. I'm sorry, just aesthetics. And then we had communications below that. And below that was the beach and waterfront. What we're starting to see is that communications really belongs with community, because it's communications that helps enable this good feeling about community. It's one of those biological imperatives. People would like to live together and socialize with like-minded people and that sort of thing, but they need to be able to communicate effectively to enable that. Under that, we've got the core values of our city employees and our elected officials. We've made some assumptions, and we've got strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And some of that stuff is in the back portion of this thing. On the very next page, what you'll see is just a nutshell synopsis of what those priorities are. The number 1 goal is the safety and health aspect of it. The number 2 is the tax dollar value. Goal 3, communications and community. Goal 4, aesthetics, beach water. And you'll see that goal 3 has kind of a nutshell definition of what that communications are. What are those aspects of communications or community that kind of describe what we're looking for. And as you go from the broader goal of communications and community, you get down to the specific projects that support and drive those goals. So as you can see, objective number 1 right now is to convene this communications ad hoc committee, and that supports goal number 3. The very next page, you'll see some assumptions there. You can read through these at your own leisure. Obviously, this pandemic stuff has been a new issue and a new item to consider when it comes to some of these assumptions. And while we don't understand all aspects of this thing, some things are coming into focus about this pandemic stuff. One, things that will change. There are things that will change, such as things that will not change. Things that will not change. Decay of our infrastructure. Things are getting worse at the age. We need to fix things. Flooding continues to be an issue. Red tide will always be there. Things that will change, such as public meetings, staff-resident interactions, and communications. That's where you come into the picture here. And of course, there are things that are uncertain at this point, such as the economy and real estate values. And then if you look down at number 4, an assumption that was made at the prior council and probably needs to be reviewed and validated and see if that is true. But the assumption was that while residents want to be informed, they don't necessarily want to participate in the daily operations of the city or those processes. I think that's kind of like this, goes along the lines of the silent majority. As long as an issue doesn't reach out and touch them, everything must be great down at the city, right? So you need to go through these assumptions and challenge them and take those into considerations as well. The back pages are some of the strengths and weaknesses. You can go through that. And I'm available, city manager is available. Anytime you want to ask questions about or challenge some of these items in the strategic plan, by all means, give me a call. I'll be happy to meet with you. Can I answer any questions? No? Good luck, and thank you very much for being engaged with your city. I appreciate it. Thank you.
In our packet, we've got another version of the strategic plan, it's the whole strategic plan for your reading enjoyment. Okay. So we have been charged with looking at the communications piece of this, of these goals. And as it says on the agenda, discussion of methods to provide information from the city to Bel-Air Beach citizens. It's interesting, in here we have the word citizens. In the other thing, he used the word residents. I think we've also got property owners, which maybe comes in a different, those people get to pay property taxes that we get. They may not vote here, they may not live here full-time, but I think they need to be included in those with whom we communicate and who we listen to. Yes?
I had a quick question on that, actually. I was reading through some of there's good demographic information, but is there a way of knowing how many are permanent or part-time residents?
I think we have some of that information either through the voters registration, through the
Property
property appraiser, yeah. We can get some of that information, which I think is something that we do need to do. I mean, those people, they may not live here full-time, but they pay a lot of our bills as taxpayers. So I'm not sure exactly if we have those demographics as to how many.
We kind of how we break it out, it depends on homesteaded and non-homesteaded properties in the city. Because typically if it's a non-homesteaded property, they're either renting it or they're just part-time residents and they're gone. And someone that lives here full-time typically would homestead their property. So we've got that breakout because we do a mailing each year to both sectors. So we can get that information for you.
Thank you.
The other question I have is, we're going to have to go to the technical side here. Specifically, do we have email addresses of residents? You know, when we go through that list, first of all, do we have some? And second, is it crossed all the way over so we have not only those that own the property, but those that reside on the property? You know, trying to make sure we have a total collection of available people to communicate to.
Well, we have an email list that's got about 469 potential emails. And if I was betting, I'd say 200 to 250 are,
Junk.
huh?
It's junk.
Or junk. Well, I'm not saying junk, but
Well,
I'm saying they're not residents, or they were residents at one time, they moved away, or they're multiple emails to the same family.
Right.
So I wouldn't call it a credible email list. And I will tell the committee, and I'm just going to use the undergrounding project that we just did at Bellevue Estates Island. We sent a postcard out asking for emails if they wanted to get updates. It's 115 properties, we got 10 responses saying they wanted to be put on an email list. So that is a struggle with getting people to join an email list.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's more of a question because, well, we're definitely probably going to go over into the electronic realm. One, trying to stay away from things like Nextdoor. In fact, I recommend don't even touch social media because you can't put a correct story out there continuously. You know, because people tend to chime in with some really off the cuff remarks that are not correct. But email is one. Second of obviously is during this COVID crisis is the ability for remote meetings. Those are really the two ideas, you know, so far with me. But again, we're way early in this process. So I just wanted to put those out there for now.
And there's also snail mail,
Yeah.
the old-fashioned stuff.
It does work.
I think we will end up with 3 or 4 avenues for people to get their information, whether it's a better city website, better access to information there, email if they select that, if they want to be on a phone call, if they want to get an automated phone call. I think with the different ages of people, older people may not have email. They may not feel comfortable with going to the website. They'll want snail mail. They'll want to open up their mailbox and see the letter from the city with whatever information they have. But Yeah, I think we'll have a variety, when we come or done, of avenues, you know, because of the diverse nature of the residents here.
Absolutely.
May I make a suggestion? Since, I mean, there are so many ways to communicate, and we're kind of already starting to bounce around, is maybe we make a list of every possible way, and then sort of pro-con each one, you know, versus the city's ability versus the reach it's going to have based on demographics, residency, and that type of thing. So maybe tonight we can kind of culminate that list of all the things that, you know, all the types of communication we'll analyze, and then kind of go home and I don't know how much you're trying to accomplish tonight, but maybe go home and kind of digest that and then come back prepared to discuss
Right, yeah.
each one.
Sort of throwing out some ideas here, and then
Yeah.
at the next meeting, we'll figure out maybe between now and then, how many would work for this people and how many would work for that many people.
Right. And how many the city's even capable of doing.
I mean, there's obviously a cost for snail mail. Will they, if we send something to them, will they send it back? Will they send it back?
The other question about that is,
Yes.
I just want to make sure we know what our purview is, because obviously we're sending recommendations to the council.
Yes.
Do we have a budget, or will we just provide open-ended recommendations to the council, and they decide what to what to implement, and what money to put toward that implementation? Because some of these do require cost. The snail mail, obviously, some forms of e-meetings, you know, a listserv.
I think we will provide, it says somewhere in here that we prioritize them as to, you know,
That wasn't done
here's
budget
this,
ago.
but here's the negative, here's this one, and here's the positive on that one, and so on. So that's something that I think we need to think about for our next meeting, is to ways we could get to these people, how we divide up the people in the city as to, you know, the people who are full-time residents, to the people who are homesteaded, to the people who live in New York and only come down here for.
I think if you can make a final recommendation on that, we already pretty much have a structure here. We started going off on already, we're like, okay, gather all the information about available ideas. Can we perhaps just stick to the prioritized recommendation? I mean, we already have a list, like, okay, first meeting, what needs to be communicated? Second, how? And then, you know, that's where we start talking about the various distribution methods and then the whens. I mean, it's just simple. When you stay with their format, you can expect a report just along those lines.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's almost your agenda right there, you know, next meeting, what needs to be communicated.
No, but the what's are usually pretty straightforward. I know that we're mad at social media right now, but we also have to take some examples from it. It's basically what many people may look at as social media is being used against us. I look at it as more of a cry for information. And currently, it's not being utilized in a way that's productive for this community. There are, number one, if there's not an official message on these platforms coming from the city, then there's no regulation over what is said, and no one knows what is official or what's not. So as far as what needs to be communicated, I see things like definitely upcoming agenda items, projects that are going on around the community and the city, special announcements. A lot of those things are already being published on the city's website, but a lot of people don't even go there. They use Facebook, Twitter, whatever, as their news tool. And unfortunately, the process that's happening now, where it gets away from us and the rumor mill starts up, it's because that's the only place they go for their news, and we don't have basically a horse in the race. So even though we're publishing data over here, and half the community is going over here, there's definitely, we have the opportunity to take control of that argument and put it back. Basically, anything that goes on the website should automatically just go right over to Facebook. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of tools that we can use that don't cost any money, or are very cost effective for the community. I certainly believe that mailing things out, some people are still going to want that. And in certain cases, it's so important that we should absolutely mail things out.
The only thought right now I have with using social media is when you have to control the message, because you have people that are contributing to the sites, good, bad, otherwise, uninformed, informed, that the message quickly skews. And two, we're also looking for effective feedback to us. You can't go back to, say, a Facebook feed and eliminate those that are actually living in the area, or you may mistakenly take a bunch of comments out of text or use those to make a decision for people that don't even live here.
Okay, so in a case like that,
That verification validation type thing.
right, in a case like that, currently on the city's website, if Patty posts the next meeting date, there is no place for someone to reply. You can very well do the exact same thing with Facebook. So anything she puts on that website is automatically duplicated to Facebook, and it can be locked down to a certain point where all it is for distributing information.
Good point.
Another thing that I've seen is, or what needs to be communicated, is what our residents, they want to be heard. They don't necessarily want to come down here. It's not always the best environment to try to get the message out. At the same time, where they're currently using Facebook and Nextdoor as their platform to send messages to the council, second or third hand. By the time we get it, because I'm not constantly monitoring Facebook, and I don't even subscribe to Nextdoor anymore. It just got completely out of hand. Our website probably needs a place where you can do basically a drive up, leave a message, and you're done.
And verify against existing resident or, property owner, so we get a valid response.
Right. Well, something like that. But the same goes with that. As soon as someone drops their comment off, the rest of the residents don't have a place to comment on that. So it doesn't turn into a giant free-for-all. You drop your message off, that's your subject, and it's up to the city whether they want to respond or not. And it comes from these guys right here.
And again, it's fully under sunshine laws. When you start working with a chat room or something, it's off the books.
Absolutely. So, this was really one of the reasons why I got involved with the city, was because of the communication factor. And I just didn't feel like that there was a good two-way communication going on. And I think with all the technology that's already out there, and combined with what we're currently using, I believe that we're going to be able to solve this pretty quick.
Any other? Look like you had something down there. Oh, no, that's okay.
Yes, I was interested in one thing you were saying about the sunshine laws. Like, if the citizens want to speak to the city, or you want to provide that conduit, then the sunshine laws really can't, in order for it to be open conversation, I don't know how the sunshine law, it has no place there, right? Because it's a conversation between a citizen and their city, and not necessarily the city management. It has to be safe for the citizens to talk to the city.
Are you talking about like a Facebook posting?
I don't, I don't even know if the city has a Facebook. I mean, I don't do Facebook, I don't know, but you were talking about, okay, you were talking about maybe having a way where citizens can talk to the city, whoever's in leadership at the time, which I think is a good idea, but it has to be a safe place for them, and it has to be a safe place for the people that are speaking for the city as well. So that's an important thing that has to happen in order for communication, open communication to exist. I don't know how any law would stop.
If the city is using a Facebook posting, and Commissioner Gaddis, I think, made the distinction, you post something that is informational and you don't include it as a basis for a two-way discussion, that to me is fine. If you are doing something that is the starting point for a two-way discussion, then, I mean, practically, I don't know how you don't have a moderator. And my question would be, are y'all set up as a city to moderate Facebook and social media? And my answer, I think, would be no. You're not set up for that.
And you wouldn't want to be.
Well, there's larger cities that have dedicated people that do stuff like that. But I don't know that Bel Air Beach is one of those. And if you don't have somebody moderating it, then I think there's a tendency that the phrase was used, a free-for-all, and I would say that's what you can likely expect depending on the topic. And, you know, unfortunately, I know this isn't just a problem in any small town, it's a problem in probably every small town, and things spin out of control, and there's a lot of, and it was said earlier, informed opinions, there's some completely uninformed opinions, there's at times stuff that I would wonder whether it's approaching defamatory, and it just becomes a free-for-all. And I don't know it's a public forum, and a public forum is an exchange of ideas, good, bad, and ugly. And, you know, is that what you're trying to do? Or are you simply trying to disseminate information about community events and meetings and things like that? And to me, at some point you have to have a discussion pretty early on, is what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to disseminate information, or are you trying to foster debate? And if you want to do one over the other, then that will be the path you go down. But I don't know that Bel Air Beach has the resources at the city side today to moderate a forum or multiple social media sites. That can become a pretty time-consuming, expensive thing.
So what I saw with the city of Clearwater, that's where if you subscribe to natural gas, that's the service we have here. And it was early one morning. It's a little embarrassing, but I had two bills. They both had Clearwater in their name. And I accidentally sent a $500 payment to the city of Clearwater for a $40 gas bill. So I needed to get in touch with them, and several days had gone by, and I couldn't find an email address. Well, I finally found a form. So I filled out the form, and I didn't give any real detailed information other than this is my address and here's what happened. But there was a checkbox, private. You could click private if you wanted to. Well, I didn't really even think anything about it, so I didn't click private. And I clicked submit. And I remember it said, even if you click private, this is public record. And so I went ahead and submitted it. And then all of a sudden, it took me to a page where I saw everybody's comment. and they had selectively responded to the ones they thought were important. So anybody could drop a message off, but it was basically the city of Clearwater was picking and choosing which ones. Anything that was private did not appear, but it was still public record. So if someone wanted to request those, any messages pertaining to this, you know, I guess their gas system or whatever, then you can retrieve those records. The point I'm getting at is that there's many ways that the citizens can communicate without picking up the phone and calling Glenn or Patty directly, or coming to the meeting, which no one wants to come to. I mean, there's a few people that come here often, but you realize how many residents we have. Very few actually show up for the meetings and don't know what's going on, but I'm sure they have questions. So that's what needs to happen. We need to figure out some way to make it easier for them to communicate with us and respond back to them if necessary.
Well, you know, I don't know how much more we're going to discuss it now. We've got some things to think about for next meeting as to, you know, what we can do with the website, with Facebook, how we, the makeup of our citizenry, our residents, you know, how we determine who gets emails, who wants, how we reach out to everybody, say, would you like to do email, real mail? See, what would you like to do? So I think these are some things that maybe we can go into more detail on next week or next meeting, if that's. Anyone else have any other comments for tonight? Yes, sir.
I wanted to make two clarifications. I think, Dave, you were on the charter review committee, so I didn't mean to omit him. And he did a good job too, by the way. I would be remiss if I didn't say that. The other thing, and I should have said this during my presentation, the Florida Attorney General has a website, and I use it, I would say several times a week. They have Attorney General opinions, and the Attorney General opinions can be searched and by keyword, and if I'm going to look at a sunshine law issue or a public records law issue, that is one of the first places I look almost every time. I usually don't even start with the statute. I start with the Attorney General opinions, and if you need to look into something just for your own curiosity, that is a really great resource, because their system, sometimes you try and search stuff and it just doesn't work very well. Well, their site works very well, and you'll have a list of the results with their relevancy, and the opinions are really well done. And the reason I usually start with that is in a Attorney General opinion on any given topic, they will cover both the statutory basis and the most current case law. So it's a good resource, and it's an insider baseball type thing that I wanted to tell you about and just omitted it earlier. So,
You happen to know the name of the website off the top of your head?
pardon me?
Do you happen to know the website address off the top of your head? HEO.gov or something?
I will know in a second. I think it's My Florida Legal. Yeah, it's myfloridalegal.com. And in the upper right-hand section, it's got a search box.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Always good to know. Yes, sir, Glenn.
I just wanted to make a give you an alternative approach to starting this process, and that is, you're kind of starting to jump into the different means to communicate the stuff, but maybe the place to think about starting is, what is it that you need to communicate? What are all of those things that need to be communicated? And then, as you start to categorize those, I think it's going to start falling out what priority, what timeliness, who the customer is, and it's going to start falling out immediately. But rather than jumping right into how to communicate it, my question is what are those things that need to be communicated? You got outages coming, you got project, you got budget stuff, you've got emergency notifications. What are all of those things that need to be communicated? And then you can kind of figure out what's the best way and what priority to communicate. Just an alternative.
Well, like you said, it's right in our charter. It tells you the steps, pretty much follow this.
It's going to all fall
Yeah,
out.
it's already there.
Also, before the next council meeting, we're supposed to submit to the council recommendations for quick fixes, something that will show that we're,
When's the next meeting set for?
that was, what day is that one?
July 6th. July 6th.
So we probably need to have at least one more meeting.
Yeah, I was looking, are Wednesday evenings good for most everybody?
Yes.
Okay. You want to do Wednesday, the 24th? Does that work?
Check it right quick.
Is that okay? Okay, Wednesday, the 24th at 6 o'clock.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
When is the next city council meeting again?
July 6th.
Yes, they'll get us to put some stuff together and then 6 is for our next meeting, let's think about what we need to communicate and a little more thought on, how we might do it, to whom we might do it.
Do you think we can trade emails between all of us?
Email to Patty.
And then Patty, yeah. Well, because the way I understood it, okay, if we're all in the same email with Patty, we can communicate.
No,
I got that all.
No,
no.
it's still a public record. I mean, it's a
Well, I
public
know it's
record.
public record, but,
No, we cannot communicate other than at an official meeting.
okay.
Yeah, no, but here's the deal. If you've got a list of something, you've got information, occasionally those types of emails can be sent. But you send it to her only and ask her to forward it to us if it's okay. She's a very, that's why I refer to her as a filter, because she's great at it.
Thank you.
If you have some sort of a document or something that you want to put in next meeting's agenda packet, send it to Patty, and Patty will put it in there, right?
Yes.
I just want to, since we're here now and it's legal, I would like to just say that maybe one of the methods that we use, and it costs money, and I'm sorry about that, but it's a different sign out front that's even in a V shape where you could read it coming and going, but the way it is now with the blue letters and the black letters, there's no way I can even read it without pulling in, especially if the letters are blue. I don't know about the rest of you, but there's got to be a better sign, and even that would be a big help. Just the signage.
We've heard this.
Yeah, I'm
before.
sure people about that.
We
It's not
talked
forgetting.
at one point about putting an electronic kind of sign,
Those
like
are
they have at,
expensive.
Largo High School, something like that.
And those are-
It didn't go over really.
Dangerous and fog too.
Pardon?
They're also dangerous and fog and low
Yeah.
light.
Anyway, okay. Anything else? Comments, anything? Okay. If you'll remember to give your folder and your plastic bag back to Patty to save it for next meeting, right? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.